Google Analytics is a great tool, but it can be a bit daunting if you've never used it before. Let's take a little look at getting it set up. So obviously, if you've got a Google account like a Gmail, then that's fine. If not, you need to create one. Then we head over to the Google Analytics website. Now, you might initially be surprised to see Google Analytics Premium. It actually takes you to the same place. So if you've not signed up and paid for your £90,000 or your 150,000 US dollars, ignore it and we can click on Google Analytics. As we go in, if you've never used Google Analytics before, you may see the sign up option. Just click sign up. Then we'll be asked whether or not it's a mobile or website. If it's a mobile app, we click that. Otherwise, we continue on with the account name. If you're only going to have one website in here, you can enter the details. If you're going to have multiple, then you might want to enter an organization name instead. So that's what we'll do in this case. Once we've done that, we're then down to website name. So entering in the website name is something meaningful to yourself about that particular website. Once we're down there, we then have to enter the website URL. Again, none of this that we actually do here actually affects the tracking. It's all just for you to be able to see. In terms of the website URL, it does affect a couple of the reports. So do try and make it accurate. If you don't know the URL or it's not been bought yet, by all means, you can enter something in here different and then update it later. Then select the category, which is used for Google's aggregate benchmarking data. Again, don't worry about it too much if you're not entirely sure, but try and select something meaningful. Report and time zone does matter because, again, in the reports, this is where you'll see visitors and an hourly rate will be at this time zone. So do select where you operate if you can. In terms of the options below that, I'll just leave them by default unless you're wanting to look into them any further. We can now see we've got 0 out of 100 accounts that we can add to this particular account. We then read the terms and conditions, as we always do, of course, yes. Accept them, and then once we've got that, we will be given a tracking ID. So the tracking ID, as we can see here, is the UA-737-6404-1. So that's just telling us that that's our Web Property ID or Google Analytics ID. You might see it called both. As we can see below that, we also have the website full tracking code. So we've got both the tracking ID and then we've got the full website tracking code in itself. Now, in some cases you might want one and in some cases you might want the other. It all depends on how you're planning to implement Google Analytics. So there's a couple of ways we can do this. First, we can take this full code and we can add it to a template or to a static HTML file. Or we can simply take this tracking ID and add that into some kind of plugin or system that already has it. So let's try copying that. And let's head over to a WordPress implementation. So there's lots of WordPress plugins for Google Analytics. Yoast has a very popular one. One I like to use occasionally is called Google Analyticator, which is a fairly simple one. And once you've installed that, if you head over to your WordPress installation, you will be able to see it's just a case of selecting whether or not it's enabled or disabled. Then you go into the Analytics account field and you just basically would then paste in the Analytics ID that you've already copied. So you don't need to paste the full tracking code, all you need is the ID. Now the other option that we've got below that is the tracking code. So we can see here it says traditionalga.js. So that's the old version of Google Analytics. The newer version is called Universal, otherwise known as analytics.js. Now, the analytics.js part refers to the actual tracking code in itself, because the main difference between these two versions is the tracking was completely rewritten to basically optimize and bring in new features. Now, if you're not entirely sure what version you have, you can head back over to your tracking codes. And once you start to have a look at that, it'll be a lot easier to understand. So as we can see here in the tracking code, it actually does mention analytics.js. Because we've got that, we know that we're on Universal. If you're signing up for a new account these days, you will not be given an older traditional version. It will always be analytics.js. You may have some old accounts that are still on the old version, but it's unlikely. Most accounts have now been migrated. Once we've done that, we can click Save Changes, and in theory that would be the tracking code now live on our WordPress site. Now, of course, we can check that. We could go to our website and we could check that, and we'll show you how to do it later. But the other way is that we take this full tracking code and we would paste it into a template, usually just after the body has opened, although sometimes in the past it's been in the head, but the preferred method now is just after the body. So we've got a basic barebone HTML file here. We're just going to copy and paste that in, and then we'd save that file. Now, obviously, if you have a multi-page website and you're using, some kind of non-standard CMS that doesn't have plugins, you wouldn't want to paste this into every single page. So you'd find a header include or some sort of template, and you'd paste it into that instead. We're just using this to basically, give a demonstration essentially. So we've saved that particular file, and as we said before, now what we want to do, whether we're adding it through WordPress or a plugin or through a template, we want to check if that's actually sending data. So the easiest way to do that is, of course, through Google Analytics Real-Time. So GA Real-Time will allow you to essentially see who is hitting your site right now. Now, the best way to do that is to have two tabs open, one with real-time and one with your new page that has the tracking added on it. If you just hit that page, so refresh it, what you will see is that the traffic comes in on real-time. Now, if it doesn't, that's when we can start to look at some other methods. So as you can see here, that actually worked. So we've now got one hit come in on here. And as far as we're concerned, that's fine. The tracking's now going. We click through another couple of pages and make sure they're also tracking as well, just to make sure that we haven't just tracked the one page. And we can also use real-time for events and other areas to make sure that any advanced tracking that we have put on in the future is also tracking. However, say that didn't work, and you didn't see that particular tracking code coming in, or that particular page view hit, what would you do next? Well, you could use other plugins to actually inspect the actual hits. So one of them would be at a really simple level, the Google Tag Assistant plugin for Chrome. So this is a plugin that Google has supplied that allows you to inspect Google tracking codes. So not just Google Analytics, but other things such as their display advertising clicks and their PPC clicks. So on here we can see on this page, Google Analytics has fired. We would check that the web property ID or tracking ID matches. We would check that the syntax is universal because we know we're using analytics.js. And we would check that one page view request has been found. Now, as we can see there, it is warning that the code has been found outside of the head. Don't worry about that. It's purely just for information purposes. Nowadays, Google Analytics does recommend that you put it just after the body. The tag is asynchronous, so in theory it shouldn't slow the page down, so don't worry about that. The reason they prefer it up the top of the page rather than the very bottom, at the sort of the end of the body, is in case your page does have a slow load time. So as we can see here, it's also warning me that I have AdBlock installed, and that might prevent floodlight tags, so those other display advertising tags that we mentioned. We don't have any of them in this page. It's just being helpful in case that is what we're looking at, because it's not aware. But for now, we're reasonably happy. We know that Google Analytics has fired. We know it's the right code. We're seeing it in real time, so we're fairly confident that everything is fine. So that then would lead us to think, well, what do we do next? We've done it through WordPress, and we've done it through templates. What's the other option? Well, the other option is to use some sort of tag management solution. So Google released, not that long ago, Google Tag Manager. Google Tag Manager basically allows us to take that tracking ID and put that into a separate system to keep all our tags nice and neat. So if you imagine a content management system is for content, tag management system is obviously there for tags and gives us great governance around where we put those tags. So in a modern marketing campaign where you may have quite a lot of tags, it means that we can keep things a lot neater. So if we head over to Google Tag Manager, again we just have to sign in with the same Google account, click on Google Tag Manager this time, and we now have to set up a new account here. So again, we'll give it the same name, thereabouts of the account name for Google Tag Manager. Again, something meaningful, just so you know exactly what this relates to. Then we set up a container. So this container is going to hold all the tags for this particular website. So again, we'll just call it the website address. We've then got the option of web, or if we're using some sort of native app, we can select iOS or Android. But for web or web apps, we'll just choose web. Again, we have to select our lovely terms and conditions, which we've obviously read in full. Once we've done that, Google Tag Manager will go away and create our new container. So now what we've been given is another tag. Oh great, I hear you say another tag. So we've now got a Google Analytics tag and a Tag Manager tag. For the moment, forget about the Google Analytics tag. We're going to remove that from anything we've done. And we're going to put in a Google Tag Manager tag instead. So what we can do is take that full tag and pop that straight into our template, just where we did our Google Analytics one. Alternatively, if we're using a plugin, so we know that for Google Analytics plugins, we had to take the property ID or the tracking ID. Similarly, with Google Tag Manager, we have to take the container ID. So there is a particular ID here in the tracking code. You just kind of have to look at it because it's a little bit more hidden. But if you see down the bottom, just after where it says data layer, right here, there is a GTM-TCN2GS. That's our tag management ID. That's unique to every container we create. So we would copy that, and when we're adding through a plugin for Tag Manager, that's what we'd enter. In this case, let's add it through our template. So we're going to delete Google Analytics tag. We don't need it anymore. So that's that gone. And instead, we'll paste in our Google Tag Manager tag. So we'd save that, and we now have Google Tag Manager loaded. If we head over to our website again, and we were to refresh it and inspect it with the Google Tag Assistant tag plugin, what we would see is Google Analytics isn't currently firing. The only thing that's firing is Google Tag Manager. So Tag Assistant is trying to be helpful here. It's going, you've loaded Google Tag Manager, but we don't see any tags. So it's given us a couple of options here to optimize. One is it's not seeing that the HTTP response, it's not seeing it hitting the Google Analytics server. One of the reasons it says for that is potentially that we have the opt-out plugin installed. Well, I do have it installed, but it's disabled, but it's not realizing that. It's also warning that we have AdBlock installed, which we saw earlier, and also that we have Ghostery installed. So it's basically highlighting all these different reasons that could possibly happen. However, we know that the reason it's not happening is we haven't added a tag into Tag Manager yet. So let's head back over there and add the new tag. So we just click on New Tag, and then we get shown a library of different marketing tags that are available. So really easy sort of drag and drop type mentality to these. So we click on Google Analytics again. We've got the two options of Classic or Universal. We know we're using Universal, so we'll click on that. And first of all, we go back, we just make sure, yep, so we're analytics.js, so we know that we're Universal. And we can take our property ID, make sure we've got that on our clipboard. There we go. And once we're back in GTM, we can click on Universal, and then the tracking ID field pops up and we paste that in again. Now we've got the option for display advertising features, which brings in demographics data and other double-click data, but for the purposes of this, we'll ignore that at the moment. What we can also see is that the track type below that says page view. So in terms of Google Tag Manager, the options that we have are to install, we could use this for events or e-commerce transactions. Everything is drag and drop within GTM for Google Analytics, and we can pretty much do anything in terms of the full implementation. For this purpose, we're going to add a page view. So we've got Universal Analytics, we've got the tracking ID. We just need to give the tag a name and also select the trigger. So in this case, we're going to say, let's fire on all pages. So we could fire this tag only on certain pages. And then we're going to give it a name. So we'll just call this our GA base tag. So we know that this is the basic page tag. So we can now quickly review that we have Google Analytics, it's universal, it's got our right property ID, and it's tracking a page view. So we'd click Create Tag. Now, if we were to go back to our website now and refresh, it still wouldn't show. Because as you can see in the top right, we've got unpublished changes. So there's a full sort of test and test and publish and debug cycle to this. But for this purpose, we'll just publish that straight to live. So if we just click on the publish button, that will basically push those changes onto the live environment. And when we refresh the website, we'll be able to see it. So Let's click Publish Now. Hit Done. And now if we head back over to our page and we refresh and see what Tag Assistant is saying, what we'll be able to see is that we can now view both Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics. Now what we know is that Google Analytics isn't actually in the source code. The only tag that's in the actual template is Google Tag Manager. So you can imagine as you start to build out your implementation and add other tags, how much nicer that makes in terms of the actual templates and how cleaner the source looks, which obviously can affect page load time as well. So if we go into our GA base tag, as we can see here, that's the only tag that we've added in Google Tag Manager. But we could add more if we wanted to and kind of build this out. But that kind of gives you a demonstration in terms of the different options in terms of how to implement Google Analytics. Google Tag Manager is free ultimately, so it makes sense to use it. And it means that if you're adding other tags in the future, you've got a platform to do that. Any questions, just let us know in the comments.